Good evening, it's 8:40. Tonight we're going to be learning Maseches. What are we learning? Tonight we're going to be learning Maseches Shekalim, Daf Yud, and as well Daf Yud Aleph. We're a little bit down on Yud, but we're going to finish all the way to the bottom of Yud Aleph on the base. Mark all the way to the end of the page. You should be very happy. However, we have Mariv in 50 minutes, so we need to start moving along. We're going to get started almost halfway down in Yud Aleph at the two dots. Our Mishnah had written the Mishnah from the bottom of Testament Beis at the beginning of the Parak of Parak HaTruma. The Mishnah wrote, and here in the two dots middle of Yud Aleph, Ha'omer v'shtei alechem v'lechem apanim v'chol korbanos hatzibor. So we spoke about that in our Mishnah. And says the Gemara after the parentheses, Taman Tanina. We're going to see three cases right now, three similar cases, all of which seem to be like the Shita of Rabbi Shmuel, and then we're going to see if that holds water. Taman Tanina, we have a Mishnah that writes, everything has to come from Eretz Yisrael, umin chutz la'aretz, and even from chutz la'aretz, from new flour and from old flour, where in between those two times, of course, is the Korban HaOmer. However, when it comes to the Korban HaOmer and the Shtei Alechem, that can only be brought from Chadash, and it can only be brought from Eretz Yisrael. Rav Chona b'shem Rabbi Yirmiyah de Rabbi Shmuel, he says that this must be like the sheet of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel Omer ein ha'omer ba min hasuria. You're not allowed to bring this korban from Syria. So where else must it be from? It must be that it's from Eretz Yisrael. Syria is very close to Eretz Yisrael. So that was a land that was very close to him. You can't even bring it from there. So that must be like Rabbi Shmuel. Here's case number 2, 2/3 of the way down on Yud Aleph. Taman Tanina Neser Kedusha. Same with Mishnah that writes that there's 10 levels of Kedusha in Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael Mikudeshes Mikol Ha'aratzos. And the Eretz Yisrael is holier than the other land. To Mahi Kedusha. So what is its sanctity? Shemivin Mimena Ha'omer Babikur V'Shtei Alechem Mash'ein Mivin Ken Mikol Ha'aratzos. We see another Mishnah from the Mishnah of 10 Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael that indicates that there's something unique about it, and that is the Korban HaOmer and the Bikurim, that it only and Shtei Alechem, that it only comes from Eretz Yisrael. And again, Rav Chia or Rav Chuna, B'Shem Rabbi Yirmiyah de Rabbi Shmuel, this as well is like the sheet of Rabbi Shmuel. What does he say to Rabbi Shmuel Omer for the second time today? In Omer Bamina Syria, that you can't even bring these korbanos from Syria. It must be that this brisa is also like the sheet of Rabbi Shmuel. Case number 3, Taman Tanina Rabbi Shmuel Omer Macharish Rishus Af Hatzir Rishus. On Shabbos, we say that on Shabbos, when is choresh and kotzer aser? Even when you don't need it, it's going to be aser. What if it's a mitzvah, right? If I want to go outside and just do choresh, pasha that's aser. Why would I be doing it just because I want to? What if that would be a mitzvah? So says the Gemara, Yatza Ktsir HaOmer Shehu Mitzvah. Maybe we'd say that the Ktsir HaOmer should be done even on Shabbos. Rabbi Shmuel Kedaite, and this would be like Rabbi Shmuel as well. Rabbi Shmuel de Amar Ein HaOmer Ba Min HaSurya. He says that it has to be from Eretz Yisrael, can't be from out of town. And Kedaite as well, Damar Yatza Ktsir HaOmer Shehu Mitzvah. So we see that all three of these things are like the Shita of Rabbi Shmuel. Man Tana Shormei Svichim B'Shvius Notlan Schar Mitzvah Salishka. In our Mishnah, at the bottom of Testament Beis, it said that the Svichei Shvius, the people who are watching the growths during the Shemitah year to make sure that they were insignificant, so those people can take money from the Trumas HaLishka, from the coins that were inside of the Lishka, of the storage house, of the treasury. Who is that? It must be Rabbi Shmuel. So says the Gemara, after everything we've seen, it sounds reasonable to say that it's an Eretz Yisrael type of din, just like Rabbi Shmuel said 3 times on this page, that it can't be from Syria. So says the Gemara, Lav Dafka, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Divrei HaKol, this really could be according to everyone, Lo Matzu B'Syria, if you couldn't find the Omer and the Shtei Halechem, then fine. Mevin Oso Misvichin Sheberetz Yisrael. Then you can use even the small growths that happen in Eretz Yisrael. So maybe we uproot this whole Havamina. That when Rabbi Shmuel said that you can't bring from Syria, maybe that's only if you can't find in Syria, then you can bring from there. Otherwise, you can bring from Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara undoes this with this answer of Rabbi Yosef that maybe it is Divrei HaKol. Asks the Gemara in regard to the Omer, which we know has to be planted in Eretz Yisrael. Hahein Omer Mahu, she is Rabbi Tchila. Can you plant it lechatchila in a Shemitah year to do so? Says the Gemara, that doesn't make sense. Rabbi Chia bar Ada Voi Kume Rab Mana. Rabbi Chia bar Ada asks this question in front of Rab Mana. Lo nimsa kekometz ala shiraim she'enu ne'echalim. This is similar to a case where you have extra flour that was the shiraim of a korban, which you cannot use for another one because they're not edible. So if that's the case, that they're not edible, so says the Gemara, then of course that should be the truth here. You can't eat this food because it's shvius. So says the Gemara, Amarle, don't worry. This is one of the exceptions to the rule. That yes, it is technically it shouldn't be allowed, but we have a kula here in regards to the Korban HaOmer. This is one of the leniencies, and the Mefarshim are explicit about this, that it would be one of the leniencies. Next case, Ketat Hu Osa. In our Mishnah, we said that we pay the Shomrim of the Svichei Shvius, we pay them with money from the Truma. How do we pay them? Can you give Kodesh coins to a worker? It's Kodesh coins. They're hektish. How do we work that out? So it says the Gemara, 10 lines or so from the bottom of Yud Aleph, No talmot min hashulchan. You're right. We need to borrow money from an outsider, from money that's not yet chulin, because the korban haomer had not yet been brought. So you're not actually buying from them that which is the omer. Then you could be makdish the sanctity of the coins onto the omer, onto the grains, and then you can give the coins over to the balabakan. That's fine. However, here, before the Korban HaOmer, you have to pay in advance. You're going to have to make sure to pay. So says the Gemara, so what should you do? So you borrow money that's not hektish. The nosim, the kotrin, and the shomer, not shel yikrav HaOmer. And you give it over to the workers because up until that point, the Korban HaOmer hadn't been brought. Once the Korban HaOmer had been brought, maybe most mitrumas halishka mechal linolav. And then once it has been brought, so then we're makdish the coins. We take the coins which are hektish, and we're makdish the grains. And now the coins no longer have a hektish status. Then we can give those coins to the workers, and that works out perfectly fine. Or we give those coins back to the lender who lent the money. But Tavos came, says the Gemara. This is a good idea. Skip the parentheses. Says the Gemara, 7 lines from the bottom. Ravacha b'shem Rabbi Ba. He gives a different answer. He says, no, you don't have to do this whole roundabout way to pay them. The whole nature of this money, kol mashi yitain hein hein damav misha rishona. Everyone knows this line item in the budget of, let's say, 100 shekel, whatever it was for the grains, for the Korban Omer. It's earmarked funds. It doesn't have a hektish status. It's understood that the money that's going to be given to these workers for the grains for the Korban Omer is going to be specific and specified, and therefore you don't have to go through this roundabout way. And the same exact machlokas of whether or not we have to go the roundabout way or the direct way is found in the following brisa. Tana, the brisa writes, the Pisrei Avanim came. The same is true by those who were the stone workers for the Mikdash. Kate said, how would we pay them? So approach number one is like we saw above. No tamos mishulchan. You borrow money from an outsider. But also the chotzvin and satatan. Chotzvin and satatan are people who do special types of craftsmanship with stones. Achelo tinasin al gabe hadimut until they make their first line, their first row. They were getting paid by the row. They put in, like, if you can imagine, the Kosel HaMa'aravi, the first major row of bricks at the bottom, then they got paid. Next major row, then they got paid. So once that happened, once they already put down the first layer, then maybe most. So approach number one is that even by the stoneworkers, you do the same roundabout way to make sure that they got paid in a way that the hektish money wasn't given over as hektish directly to regular people, but know that it made the stones kodesh first, and then the coins no longer had the status, and then we gave over the coins to the people, and then everything was fine. But Rabbi Yossi, just like we saw before, approach number two, Rabbi Yossi Bei Rabbi Bon, B'Shem Shmuel, he says, no, everything is understood. People knew from the beginning this was earmarked money, nothing to worry about, everything is good, and you don't have to go the roundabout way. And that brings us to the top of Daf Yud Amud Beis. And there we have a halacha beis and a mishnah there. We're going to be analyzing more the budget of how the money was spent from the Beis HaMikdash. There were a lot of different line items where money was being spent from. And this Mishnah will dig in a little bit more in quite some detail. This Mishnah is about a little bit more than a quarter of the page. Let's get started. Para, the para aduma, v'ser mishtaleach, the animal that would be sent lahazazel, v'lashon shel zahoris. In the para aduma, in the fire, when the animal was burning, we used to throw in some wool. And that little piece of wool was also part of this list. These three things, the para, ser mishtaleach, and lashon shel zahoris, they came from the coin boxes in the lishka. What about the kevesh para, the kevesh ser mishtaleach? What about the ramps? They used to walk the animals from a special place outside the mikdash on a ramp into the mikdash, and they wanted to make sure that it wouldn't become tamei, to minimize the chances of it becoming tamei. They walked it on a ramp, and we'll see later today that the ramps had very tall walls, so it stayed tahor. That was the whole goal. So that, and the ser mishtalech also for that, the ramp for that animal, the lashon shebein karnav, and for the wool that would be between the horns of the Sir Lazazel that would be thrown off a cliff, and money that was used to support the water system. This is talking about the walls that surround Yerushalayim, even the walls that we know of. When you walk up to the old city and you see the walls, it came from this fund. All the needs of the city, not from the true Masalishka, not from the direct coins, but from the coins that were the overflow coins, the ones that never made it into the box. The actual ramp for the para, Kohanim Gdolim Osen Mishal Atzma, we'll see a possibly disturbing story in the Gemara. Certainly in the Havamin it's disturbing. The Seifa is not so bad, but the Havamin is bad about the intentions of the Kohanim in building their own ramps. Was it to outdo the previous Kohen Gadol? We'll see. For the rest of the Mishnah, we're going to see a whole host of cheetahs and different line items in the budget of what was paid for and from which bank account. Mosar shiur halishka mahu yosim behen. If there was any money left over from the overflow coins in the lishka, what would be used for those coins? Lochen behen ya yenos shmanim v'siltot. You could buy wines, oils, and flowers. V'haskar lehektish, and you're allowed to sell them. You get your own little eBay account, an Amazon account. You can go sell it, no problem at all. You can make money for the Beis HaMikdash. It's a great way to make money. That's Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. However, Rabbi Akiva says absolutely not. Ein mistakrin b'shel hektish. You're not allowed to take something that's hektish and sell it to make more money. And says the Gemara, Af lo mishel aniyim. This is a real shiloh in the postgame. Are you allowed to take money that was donated by an individual, a foundation, whatever it is, and invest it to increase the volume of money that you have to give to poor people? So it says the Gemara, Aflo Mishal Anim, you're not allowed to invest money that was given for Aniyim. That sounds counterintuitive in a way. You can find a way to make the money work, you should. So we'll see later in the Gemara, heter for this, and a beautiful quote from the Shulchan Aruch, Baal Peh, not in print, no time, but we will see a wonderful idea that comes off of this Gemara. Let's continue. Mosar ha-truma mahayu osin. What if there was extra actual truma coins? That is for rikuei zav tzipui lebeis kodesh hakodashim. That was used to build the hammered gold of the walls that was in the kodesh hakodashim. Rabbi Shmuel Omer Mosar ha-peiros kayetz hamizbech. If there were extra fruits, we'll see that not everybody agreed with this. We'll see in this Mishnah that not everyone agreed that there was a thing called Mosar ha-peiros. But for those, if there were Mosar ha-peiros, Rabbi Shmuel says they can be used for kayetz hamizbech. Kayetz hamizbech is a phrase that refers to the fact that when the mizbech was not being utilized, they would take an animal and they would do more hakravos. They do more. We didn't want the mizbech to be empty of animals. If there was a time that it was empty, we'd go to this fund, the Mosar Peiros fund, according to Rabbi Shmuel. We'd take that money and we would burn another korban. Mosar Truma, he held differently than the Tanakama. Mosar Truma l'kli shares, that the Mosar Truma, the extra coins from the Truma, from the buckets inside the lishka, those would be used to build the kli shares. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Mosar Truma leketz mizbech. I disagree with you. The ketz mizbech isn't from Mosar Peiros. He says it's from Mosar Truma. And Mosar Nesachim, extras from the wines, that's lekli shares. Reb Chananya Skan HaKohanim. Anyone know where that's from? Reb Chananya Skan Kohanim. Huh? And I think it was some Daf Yomi and Psachim in Eruvin, some very hard to get with his name. I just remember. It was Eruvin, no? It was Eruvin. Is that what it says on the side?
I don't know. I just remember it's like on a days.
For big. Eidetic memory. It's unbelievable. Photographic. So what does Rav Chanina Skan Kohanim say? He says, no, I have a different answer than even Rav Akiva. Mosar Nesachim, excuse me, Ketz Mizbech. He says, no. Mosar Nesachim, the extras from the wines, that would be for the extra korbanos on the Mizbech. Mosar Truma l'kli shares, and the extras from the Truma would be for kli shares. And Zevazeh, a reference to Rabbi Akiva and Rav Chananya Skan HaKohanim, Zevazeh, lo hayumodim bepeiros, they did not say that there were extras from the peiros that were used at all. So only Rabbi Shmuel held that there was a concept called Mosar HaPeiros. Let's get into the Gemara. Kevesh para. They would build a ramp for the para. Duma Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman B'Shem Rabbi Yonasan Gimel Lashonosing. A reference not to the para really, but to another part of our Mishnah on the top line where it says V'lachton Shel Zahor. There's three types of wool that were used. There was Shel Seir for the Seir Mishtalech B'Sela. That was with one amount, one weight. Shel mitzora b'shekel, and for a person who was a mitzora, he would need the wool as well, but b'shekel, and shel para, and for the para duma b'shtei slime. However, there's a machloket on that last one. Rabbi Chunya debras chivrin, Rabbi Chunya from that city, and Rabbi Ba bar Zavda b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Chalavda, shel para b'shtei slime umech. There was a little bit more, it was 2.5 slime. V'itz mafkin lishna be'asar azuz. It's not a different amount, just speaking in a different coinage, but it's the same currency, which is that it was 10 zuz. Skip the parentheses. Rabbi Yehuda b'Shem Rabbi Shmuel Talmidei Chachamim Hamalam Denes HaKohanim. What about the educators who taught the Kohanim halach hilchos shchita, hilchos kabbalah, hilchos zrika? They taught them all the halachos. Where do they get paid from? Says the Gemara halfway down in Yudam and Beis Notlan Scharan Mitrumas Halishka. They got paid from the actual box of coins in the Lishka. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Radifa b'Shem Rabbi Imi Mivkere Mum Mekachim. The ones who were to check that there were no mums. Notlan Scharan Mitrumas Halishka. They got from the same box. Rabbi Acha and Rabbi Tanchum Bar Chia b'Shem Rabbi Simloi, Magihe Sefer HaAzara, or as you see on the side, Sefer Ezra, the Sifrei Torah. Who were the ones who were looking at the Sifrei Torah to make sure they were kosher? Nolan Scharim from the same box, Mitrumas Halishka. Rugidel Bar Binyamin b'Shem Rabasi, Shnei Dayanim Gzelos, the people who were in charge of being a Dayanim for Gzelos, Nolan Scharim Mitrumas Halishka. What's the problem with this phrase? Dayanim for Gzelos, you need 3. So what is it? You can't pass in Mominus with less than 3, and Nefashos are 23. So what is this? So the Meforshim explain it's not about Gzela Mamish. It's to make sure that the system of fines and consequences, the fiscal consequences of the community, however they were running things in the Mikdash, that was done by 2 different people. And how did they get paid? Notlan Scharim, Mitrumas Halishka, same box as well. Shmuel Amar, what about Nashim Ha'orgos beParoches? You have women who were experts in the Ariga, in the weaving of the Paroches. How do they get paid? That's a machloket. Notlan Scharim Mitrumas Halishka, they get paid from there, from the Lishka itself. However, Rabbi Chuna Omer Mitrumas Bedek HaBayis, from a different line item in the budget from the Bedek HaBayis fund. Mapalig, what's the machlokas between them? Machlokas is Shmuel Avad Lake Korban. Shmuel, who says that she takes from the Trumas Halishka, this has the same halachic status of a korban. Just interesting to think about it that way. The Paroches, is that like something that is decorative? It's not decorative. According to Shmuel, it's the same thing as a korban. So you're taking the money from the same place as you would the korban, which is the Trumas Halishka. That's a very powerful concept for the paroches. Rav Huna, Avad Lucky Binyan, and he says no, that this is part of the building, and because it's part of the building, you can't take from the Trumas Halishka, you have to take from the Bedek HaBayis. When you're building a building, you take from the Bedek HaBayis from. When you're taking it for a korban, you take it from the Trumas Halishka fund. So you have to know where you're taking things from, and in order to do that, you have to codify and tag everything. And in all accounts receivables, there's always these coding systems. What project is it from? I know in the it's this project, this person, this one's in charge. It all has to be very clear to where the money's going. Fine. Rav Chizkiah Tana Rabbi Yehuda, Gad Gedos, that's his name. Haktoras v'chol korbanos hatzibur vayin mitrumas halishka. All of the Ktoras and separately the korbanos hatzibur, all of them come from trumas halishka. Mizbeach hazav v'chol kli shares vayin mimosar nisachin. That the Mizbeach HaZahav and the Kli Sharis, interesting that it's not Bedek HaBayis, it comes from something else. It comes from the Mosar Nesachim. I didn't see an answer as to why that's the case. Mizbeach HaOla v'Heichal v'Ha'azaros by Shiur Halishka. That's very interesting. Shiur Halishka. We're going to ask a kasha on that in the Gemara. But the Mizbeach HaOla and the Heichal and the Azaros, these holy rooms, where do they come from? Shiur Halishka. The Azar, the Heichal comes from Shiur Halishka. Why? Either Bedek HaBayis or Trumas Halishka, it's either going to be like the machlokas we just saw above. Do we say that the paroches, for example, is a korban, or is the paroches really part of Bedek HaBayis? So that's why it's unbelievable that the Azara and that the Heichal were made out of shiur. There's just the leftovers of the lishka. However, chutz la'azaros, the Azaros themselves are buying lishkas Bedek HaBayis. Fine. So asks the Gemara, wait a minute. You just said that these things above are buying mi shiur halishka. You said that the mizbeach ha'ola and the heichal and the azaros were from the shiur halishka. Well, that can't be. V'atani avnei mizbeach ha'eichal v'azaros mo'alin b'hem. That there's meila there. And how can you say that there's meila by shirayim? V'chiyesh meila b'shirayim. So this is an answer we've seen a few times in this Masechta. Amar Reb Chia, 10 lines from the bottom on Daf Yomi Beis. Amar Reb Chia, klum amar Reb Meir el besoch shenaso v'achal chutz l'shnaso anon kayamin. No, that's not necessarily. I'm sorry, I skipped a line. Reb Meir Amar Mo'alin b'shirayim. Reb Meir says that there is meila b'shirayim, so no problem at all. You could have meila by those stones. And then the Gemara says lav dafka. Here's answer number 2. Amar Reb Chia. No, it's not necessarily that's the case that we hold like Reb Meir. Klum Amar Reb Meir b'soch shenaso. The only time there's going to be meila is in that year. And what case are we going to be dealing with here? So that doesn't work. You can't say that it's from the shirayim because what about a year out? So then there's no stones that have any me'ila by them. That's impossible. Of course, there's me'ila by the stones. These are some of the shilos. Can you use the mikdash walls to put a little patek in? So if something chips out of it, then that may be me'ila. You got to be careful about that. That still applies today. We're not in the same year, and there's still me'ila, so it can't be from the shirayim. That's why the Gemara rejects the answer that it's from Meir, and therefore rejects the possibility that it was paid from the shirayim. 8 lines from the bottom, Daf Yomi Beis. Let's continue. Amar Chizkiah Tana Rabbi Yehuda Gad Ganios, the same person as before, although his name was slightly spelled differently here. Hashulchan b'hamanor b'mizbechos v'parochos me'akvan es korbanos tivir Meir. Let's say one day you woke up and the shulchan broke. So can you work in the base of Mikdash that day? The answer is no. There are some things that are ma'akev. We need to have these things in place. The shulchan, the menorah, and the mizbechos, and the paroches, those are ma'akvan es korbanos tivir Meir. Chachamim omrim, no, ein lecha ma'akev es korban el shiur be'akan bilvad. The things that you wash your hands with, because the kohanim can't walk in without being matahir their yadayim and raglayim. If they're not being matahir yadayim, they can't do anything. That's going to be the only thing that's l'ikuba. But if the shulchan is not there today, you can still bring korbanos. So that's a machlokas in the Tanaim. The problem, says the Gemara, is that none of the Amoraim learn that way. Says the Gemara, I shouldn't say none, but the ones that presented here, they haven't learned that way. 4 lines from the bottom. Lochin, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, Bar Chanina, Terehon, both of them Amar, and they both said, Kol Hain, Anything in the pasuk, any kli in the mikdash where the word nochach was used, like by the menorah, that's ma'akev. Or according to some tzela, enu ma'akev. Where the tzela hamishkan, so then that's not ma'akev, just the word nochach is. So Amar Reb Shmuel bar Nachman b'shem Reb Yonasan, afilu tzela ma'akev. Different shitas on what's considered to be the ikuba. If there's one of these kalim is missing in the mikdash, yes, you can bring korbanos, or no, you can't. So then that's what all of these shitas are saying. Last line of Yudam Beis, turning to the top of Yud Aleph from an Aleph. Amar Rabbi Ila b'shem Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman ve'afilu sima ma'akev. The word vayasem, when it's used in the Torah, all of those are ma'akev. So that doesn't stem with what we said before, because the machlokas in the Tanaim is either that these 4 things that are listed are problematic, that if they're missing, you have the shulchan, the menorah, the mizbechos, and the paroches, or according to the chachamim, that it's only going to be the kiur and the kano. So which one is it? Because these Amoraim don't seem to be agreeing with those limited 2 shitas of the Tanaim. So answers the Gemara. Top line, last couple of words on the line. Yura Aleph Amid Aleph Rabbi Chanina Kan be'avodos shebifnin, kan be'avodos shebechutz. They're talking about different things. The Tanaim were talking about one, and the Amoraim were talking about another. They're not arguing with each other. They're talking about two different things. Which ones? Which? Take a look at the Korban Eda, top line, last word on the first line. Kan dibra maskal kan ba'avoda shebifnim sheba la'avod bifnim kulam me'akvin. So when all of the Amoraim were talking about all their different shitas, that's avoda bifnim. But when it comes to avoda b'chutz, the only thing that's ma'akev outside of the kodesh, all the regular korbanos that were brought, those were only going to be limited by the shiur and the kano. Second line, Yad Aleph Amud Aleph, continues the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Chanina, Shachtis Gedola Haitza Bivnei Kohanim Gedolim. There was a terrible thing, a lot of gaiva that was taking place with the Kohanim Gedolim. Sheyoser Mishishim Kikari Zav Hayimutzim Ba. They'd spend so much money on rebuilding the bridges every time there was a new Kohen Gadol. Remember what we said in our Mishnah? There was a kevesh for the para, and there was a kevesh for the what was the second one? And the kevesh for the Sir Mishtaleach. So they have a new institution. They decide that they're going to have a new Kohen Gadol. Good. He would knock down the building, the bridge of the previous Kohen, and build his own one. So the Gemara, Shachtis Gedola. This is a huge busha. This is such gaiva. Hayumotziin, but they would take out the one that was there. Shehi kivsha shel para omeid. Below haya echad mehen motziu parasa bekivsha shel chavero. Now one Kohen Gadol would use the same ramp that was used by the previous Kohen Gadol. Be knock it down. Uvono so mishalim. Rebuild one from scratch. So the Gemara in the name of Rav Chanina. Or Chananya is very, very, sorry, wrong person. Yeah, Rav Chanina. Rav Chanina was extremely makbid and very strong language that this was really not right. Why are you wasting all of these funds to rebuild the kevesh? It's very expensive. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. 6 lines down, Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. Heisi Rav Ula Kume Rav Mana. Rav Ula said in front of Rav Mana, V'hatani, who are we talking about here? Some of these Kohanim, not all of them were Gishmak, but some of them were Gishmak. Shimon HaTzadik, Shtei Paros Asa. He had 2 paradumas in his tenure as a Kohen Gadol because they finished up the ashes from one of them. So they had to burn another paraduma. So they did. So what did he do? Lo b'kevesh shehotziazu. He built another one even within his own tenure for the second paraduma. He became the Kohen Gadol, knocked down the old bridge and built a brand new one for the paraduma. They finished the first paraduma. What did he do? He knocked down the bridge again and built another one for the next paraduma. That's not gaiva. That's clearly not related to the I have to one up the previous Kohen Gadol because it was within his own tenure that he built the thing twice. So why would he do that? You're going to say he was such a Baal Gaiva? That doesn't make any sense. Says the Gemara, what actually was the case? It was a kavod. The reason why they were doing this was a kavod, and they wanted to show that there was a huge kavod. Some of the Mefarshim are right. They want to make sure that everyone understood that the level of Tara that had to be taking place here was a very, very lofty level. It's so hard for us to imagine if we were granted, he writes on very soon, if we were granted to have a paraduma in the Beis HaMikdash, we would be elated and jumping for joy. But back in the day, it's okay, it's the second paraduma under the tenure of Shimon HaTzadik, no big deal. So they were so concerned that people were getting a little lax with their mindset, with their hashkafas about Tumah V'Tara as it relates to the paraduma. So they kept increasing the beauty and the expense of this ramp to show the paraduma. It's unbelievable. It's the red carpet, as it were. So that's what the Gemara says. It was on the cover. On this ramp, says the Gemara, about 10 lines down, Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, says the Gemara, Tani zizin uksalam hayoyot mikan mikan kedei shelo yetzu v'yatzitu hakohanim v'yitmu. Fascinating. So Machlok is sure what this means, but they would build up the walls in a way where the Kohanim couldn't look down. They didn't want them to become tamei. What does that mean? So the most basic understanding is that right now they're kind of blocked, but if they were to look over and there would be a mace underneath them, because tumas ola ad la rakia, then they'd become tamei. So therefore, they built a bridge and such. What, there's going to be a mace lying around in the Beis HaMikdash? Not. Some of the Mefarshim say it could be other types of tumah. He's going to see something that inappropriate. Still, you're in the Makam HaMikdash. Like, what's happening here? So either way, that's what the Gemara says, that the walls were built very tall. 2 dots, 12 lines or so down, a quarter of the way down on the page at Aleph Amud Aleph, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Ein Mistakrin. We said in our Mishnah that it's not appropriate for one to benefit from hektish, and as well we said the same thing by poor people. So it says the Gemara, Ela imratza, if you are looking for a loophole here, I can give you one. Here's the loophole. If you're willing to take on the burden of the risk of principle, no problem. That's great. You want to be that guy, you're gonna sign your name on the dotted line on the Beis HaMikdash. That's great. Like in organizations, like, should we get a credit card? Well, it's got to be tied to someone's, it's got to be tied to someone's social security number. If you're willing to take responsibility, then you can do it. So the same would be true in our Gemara as well. If you're going to be investing in this, you're going to be taking hektish and you're going to be using it to make money. As long as someone is taking responsibility for the loss of principal, no problem. That's totally fine. And says the Gemara, the same would be true by poor people as well. We'll see momentarily. Says the Gemara, Kehada bar zemina. There was a case by bar zemina, and says the Gemara, Ispakad gabe madal yasmin. He was holding on to something for a yasom, a package for a yasom. Also, Rabbi Mana. He went to go ask Rabbi Mana, can I invest this to make more money for the yasom? Amar Le Rav Mana answered the shayla as follows: In bais de hahafsada didach the agra the tarvechon shari. If you're willing to take the risk of the loss of principal while you're investing on behalf of the yasom, yes, no problem at all. You can share the profits. That's fine too. Not that it all has to go. And this is a little bit of a twist in the Gemara because here it says the tarvechon, the both of you, but that's not how it was framed initially when the Gemara opened at the two dots. Here, nevertheless, it is the case. The Shulchan Aruch here in Yoredea Kuf Samches Aleph writes that. This is just such a beautiful sensitivity in the Torah that when it comes to Isurei Dirabanan of Ribis, they don't apply to a Yasom. That's an unbelievable idea. By a Yasom, there's no dinim of Ribis. If it's to their benefit, then we are allowed to do so. Ayin Sham. Says the Gemara right before the next two dots, Rabbi Chia bar Ada ispakad gabe madal yasman v'abikain. Same exact story again with Rabbi Chia bar Ada, where he had a package and that would belong to a yasam. He had an investment and he wanted to invest it, and he did. He took fiscal responsibility so that they wouldn't lose any principal, and then in turn he invested it and made them a little bit of money. Almost halfway down on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, heading toward the end of this halacha. Says the Gemara, Mosar HaPeiros. Skip the parentheses. Masnis and Rabbi Shmuel. This sounds like the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. The letter Dalet should not be there. And now we're going to see a machlokas in the Amoraim about our Gemara. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef pasar masnisa mosar peiros schar lehektish. Rabbi Chia learned our Mishnah, as did Rabbi Shmuel, to say that there's schar hektish. And mosar nesachim, he said, what does mosar nesachim mean? That means when there's a market fluctuation, zusa revis. Then let's say that when the Beis HaMikdash made a deal with someone that we're going to buy from you, and for whatever they paid for, they were going to get 3 sa. Now the market turned to 4. Now they have an extra sa that they got for the same dollars. So what do you do with that extra sa? So that's what he says, is that the mosar nesachim, that would be for the saravis. Rav Yochanan pasar masnisa mosar peiros zo saravis. No, that's only for the peiros. Whereas by the peiros, that's where the previous sheet of Reb Chia said that the mosar peiros is for schar hektish. Here, Rabbi Yochanan says that the mosar peiros is what we said before for zu saravis. And mosar nesachin, what's the mosar nesachin? Above, in regards to Reb Chia, the mosar nesachin was to give us the saravis. That can't be the same here because Rav Yochanan says saravis is something else. That's for mosar peiros. Says Gemara, mosar nesachin the birutzin. And that's talking about where there was an overflow of liquid, and because there was an overflow of wine in some of the barrels, what happened with that liquid? So that's what the Gemara says, is that we would make sure that we would pay for that. Says the Gemara, but how can that be? Rabbi Chia bar Yosef the birutzin. Why doesn't Rabbi Chia speak about the birutzin in the first sheet that we just saw in the Amoraim? Amar Rav Chizkiya, he does, but not explicitly. It's included in something else. Really, Amar Rav Chizkiya madan nafal saravis nafal birutzin. However, he was going to pay for the saravis. He was also going to pay for the birutzin from the same fund. So then the Gemara asks a question. We're familiar in the Bavli with the following model: Iyam Rispeh Shlema X, then good, but Iyam Rispeh Shlema Y, then not so good. So in the Yerushalmi, this is their equivalent model. Al daite, the language of al daite. Al daite Rabbi Chia bar Yosef nicha. I understand the beginning of the Gemara because the sheet of Rabbi Chia, because ein mistakrim b'shel hektish shaflo b'shel anim, because I understand that there's a machlokas Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva is the one who says ein mistakrim. Lefichach zeh v'zeh lo hayu modim b'peiros, and that's why in our Mishnah it says that Rabbi Akiva and Rav Chananya, Skana Kohanim, did not include mosar peiros. They would not have even been privy to this machlokas that we would have between Rabbi Chia and Rav Yochanan. That makes sense. But al daite Rav Yochanan kasha 10 lines before the end of the paragraph. That doesn't make sense according to Rav Yochanan. Why not? Because Vataninan amdu migimel yisbak bedalid, when there's a market fluctuation and you're getting more. So that seems to be that according to everyone, you're allowed to keep it. That's excess. So that should be that it's schar hektish. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Shmuel said that that's allowed, and Rabbi Akiva said it's not allowed. But here it said stam. So seemingly you are allowed to get schar hektish because that's exactly what it says here in this brisa. And as well, but in our Mishnah it says that they were not modim and pairs. So which one is it? Can't have it both ways. It seemed that this Mishnah was stam. So there's no reason why we should say that there's no reason why we should say that you cannot get schar hektish. So it says the Gemara, you're right. They didn't agree in regards to peiros as it relates to kayetz hamizbeach. There they did not say that you could bring extra korbanos kayetz hamizbeach, the extra korbanos that were brought on the mizbeach. Aval modin hayu b'kli shares. They did, however, agree in regards to klisharis that there could be those financial gains, and that's what they refer to in our Mishnah as peiros. Ad kedon. What is the halacha in regards to the birutze to the wine, birutze tzibor. The halacha is that yes, the wine can be utilized, the spillover wine, whether it's from the tzibor, birutze yachid, even if it comes from an individual. So this, the Gemara says, is problematic. How can that be that you're going to build a kli sharis from the birutze yachid? I'm an individual. How can I give a gift? We don't do that. We have to we have to take it from the general fund, not from a specific individual. Says the Gemara, how can it be that you have a kli sharis is going to be made from a gift from a yachid? That's not allowed. Says the Gemara, like a Mishnah that we saw yesterday, quoted in the Gemara, a woman who makes garments for her son who is a Kohen. That's fine. She has to just be selfless about it. It can't be that it's earmarked for her son. It could be used by any Kohen. That has to be the case. It has to be a pure gift. Up until now, you said that this is true by birutze lach with liquid birutze, with wine that spill over. And maybe it would also be like birutze yavesh. Let's see, is that true? The Mishnah writes, excuse me. If there's wine that was sanctified in a kli, so you have the wine, it's ready to go for the nisim amizbech for a korban, and it's already in there, and then the korban is found to be pasul. If there's another korban, you're allowed to spill it. You're allowed to use it for that korban. And if not, then it would have to be yufsilu. We would have to leave it out until it gets bad, and that goes to show you that when the wine would become yavesh, when it would dry out and congeal, that it would still be considered pasul, and therefore it is not the same halacha for birutze lach to birutze yavesh. Birutze lach is included in the din. Birutze yavesh is not included in the din. That brings us to halacha gimel, 8 or 9 lines from the bottom of Daf Yod Aleph Amud Aleph. Let us continue. What about mosar haktoras, extra spices that were left over? Mahayu osinba. So the halacha is stated in the Mishnah. They would use this in a way to pay people, to pay the umnin, to pay the people who are experts at making the ktoras. We'll see who those families are shortly. And they would basically find a way to pay them. We'll see that there's a flaw in this. And they would get paid with the spices that were on money, and then they got the spices in their hand, and then we would buy them back. And we would then rebuy the spices with the money that we brought in after Aleph Nisan to be used for the next year. It was just again a loophole system on a way that we could pay the people who made the ketores and still not lose any of the actual ketores spices, because it was a chiddush to make it, and they'd have to pay more money to have it made more. They just wanted to come up with this loophole system to be able to pay people. But again, we have to make sure our bigger concern here is about hektish. You're not allowed to take hektish money and just throw it around. It has to be done in a way where it's mechulal al hamos, where it's going to be deconsecrated and put onto a coin, and then you can pay them. But it has to be fluid. If all the money came in time, then they would pay with new funds. Then but if not, they were then able to buy back the ketores even with old funds. We're not going to focus on this line today, but that is the end of the Mishnah. 3 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. Below nimtza hektish mischalal ala hektish. You have hektish being mischalal on hektish. How can you do that? Our Mishnah doesn't seem to make any sense. You have Torah's money, and it's being bought back with money from the Trumas Halishka. How does all of that even work? So Kate says the Gemara, you're right. Amr Shimon Bar Bisna, maybe most mechalalan al habinyan. We should actually first be mechalal the money onto a building, not a holy building, but a non-holy building in Yerushalayim. A building that was built, but that the Mikdash owns, but is not hektish, and then turning to the top of Yad from a base, you may Victor's and then you bring the Ktores, and then you would transfer the Kedusha. Then we would give those coins, and then we would give the Ktores to them, and then we would buy it back from them. Now, those coins that we initially flipped from the Kedusha of the Ktores onto the coins, what do we do with those at the end of the day? Osan Hama is That's what the Rishonim say is going on here. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Omer Ani, if this should sound familiar, Rabbi is notorious. This is his signature comment. Rabbi Omer Ani, Yinashnu lebeis garmo or lebeis avtina. Shahayu be pitum haktores ubemais lechem upon. We've seen this a few times in Shas already, that these families of the Garmo family and the Avtinas family, they were the experts in the pitum haktores and as well in making the lechem hapanim. Amr Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak vehein sheyihyu chayavin lahen maos mishor rishon. That's only if they're already owed money already from the previous year. So it says the Gemara, Reb Chia bar Abba bar Ba. This name is going to be important. So let's see who's asking the question. Let's see who answers it. Reb Chia bar Ba Bai lohayu chayavin lahen maos mishor rishon. What if we didn't owe them any money? What if the people who made the Torahs were not owed any money at that time? So then Asa Rabbi Ba b'shem Rabbi Chia. So the same person asked the question, and his Talmud quoted him back. So Rabbi Chia asked the question, Rabbi Chia bar Ba, and then Rabbi Ba, in the name of Rabbi Chia, answered the question, B'Shem Rabbi Yossi, Mikaitzin bohen es hamizbech. With these coins, what should you do? You should put more korbanos on the mizbech. Rabbi Ba bar Kohen, Ba kumi Rabbi Yosa, he was standing in front of Rabbi Yossi, and he said, Michlafo shitza, he must have switched his mind. Why? Because he went from being the questioner to being the answerer. Says the Gemara, the Reb Chia Barba Taman over there, Tzrichale. There he was asking a question. V'ko over here, Pshitale. He seems to have the answer that it's the Kaitz HaMizbech to put more animals on top of the Mizbech. But that doesn't seem to make any sense. So says the Gemara, don't worry. So the Pshitale b'Kaitz HaMizbech. What he was unsure about, what he was Tzrichale, normally Tzricha means need, but here we're translating it in a little bit in a loose fashion. That which he was asking about in regards to these coins was only talking about a klisharis. Would it work for that? There he wasn't sure. But what was pasha to him was that it certainly could be used like b'kaitz mizbech, that you could use these coins to put more korbanos on top of the mizbech, because after all, the ispalgun pitma bechulin. They have a separate argument in the Amoraim, about whether or not the Pitum Aktoras, whether or not when the Aktoras was being made, if it could be made with a device that itself isn't a Kli Sharis, it's just a regular Kli. Can it be made b'chulin? So that's a machloket. It says the Gemara 1/3 of the way down, Yud Aleph Amud Beis. Rabbi Yossi Bei Rabbi Chanina Amar Psula. That does not work. It has to be that the Pitum Aktoras is done with a holy vessel. And now let's dig into both of these shitas. Again, the machlokas says, can you make the pitum aktoras? Can you be mafatim the aktoras? Can you add all the spices together and grind them up in a device that's chulin, or does it have to be a device that's kodesh? So shita number one is that if you make it in something chulin, it's psula. That's Rabbi Yossi Bei Reb Chanina, who seems to say that it has to be done b'kedusha. Rabbi Shimon Levi says ksher, that it doesn't have to be made in a kadosh kli. It can be made in any kind of kli. Says the Gemara, my time of the Rabbi Yossi Bei Reb Chanina, who says that it's kodesh. He looks at the pasuk kodeshu, kodeshi, and what is the drasha? Shete havyasa b'kodesh. When you make it, it should be holy. Mashein came halfway down Yud Aleph from the base. My time to Rabbi Shimon Levi. Why does he say that it doesn't have to be made in a holy kli? Why can't it just be made in a regular kli? Says the Gemara, because kodeshi shetei bami truma salishka. Not that the making of the item of the Torah has to be done in a way that's kodesh, but the money has to be purchased with hektish. The kodeshi is about hektish, not about how you make it. That's just machloket samurai. Amar Rabbi Yossi Bei Rabbi Bon. Said Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina Kishmo. Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina, who says that there's a kedusha shebo, that when the Torah is being made, it has to be made in a holy vessel. That's like Shmuel. Ud Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who says that it can be made even in a non-holy vessel, that's like Rabbi Yochanan. And let's play this out. The Taninan, there's a Mishnah. Listen to this. Hamakdish nechasav, someone who dedicates his private items to the mikdash. And in there you had things that could be used for the korbanos hatzibur. What's the din? Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Torahs. You can use it to make the Torahs. So if I go into my kitchen and I donate a whole host of spices, and one of them works perfectly for the Torahs, you can use that. So that goes to show you that that my nechasim, which are not kodesh, can be used for. That means it doesn't have to be holy. That's a very good argument. And if that's the case, how does the other shita respond? How would the shita that say that it has to be holy respond? Rabbi Yosef Reb Chanina. So Amar Rabbi Shai Tipater. How would they say no? The people who donated that was beuman Mishal Beis Avtina Shayinot B'Scharok Torahs. That's different. That came from somebody who was themselves an expert and they made a big tucha. So you can't bring a raya from there. Let's go back to our descriptions of this machlokes and the comparisons to Shmuel. Ud Rabbi Yossi Bei Reb Chanina, who was strict and said that it would be psula if you would have made the Torah in a non-holy vessel. He said it would have been usher just like Shmuel. To Amarav Huna b'shem Shmuel machteshes asu osak klisharis lekadesh. That it's mamish holy directly. Shmuel says it's black on white. So Amar Rabbi Yossi Bei Rabbi Bon Amra Reb Huna Kumi Rabbi Yossi Davar shekadosh b'klisharis nifte. That's a big problem. You're allowed to be nifte, you're allowed to be poda klisharis. How can you do that if it's holy? It must be that it's really not so holy. So Amar Le v'lo de Shmuel. This is really the sheet of Shmuel after all. Even though it's true that Shmuel is really makbid that it needs to be made b'kedusha. However, the Shmuel Amar Kal hu b'mosar. It's true that when you make the Torah, it has to be done right. However, when there's leftovers, when there's mosar haktores, that can be poda, that can be traded out. Kal hu b'mosar is more lenient there. And there we have a machlokas as well about can you be lenient with the leftovers? Let's see. 10 lines before the bottom of the page, Aleph from the base to East Palgun, Hosiru Tamimim. Let's say there were extra animals that were left over by the end of the year. Shmuel Amar Niftin Kitzmimim. What Shmuel says they can be poda like Tamimin. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Niftim Kipsuli Amukdashin. And so there's a machlokas there. So what do we see? We see that Shmuel is lenient that they can be Niftim Kitmimin. What about Hosira Seirim, other animals that are left over? Al Daiti, the Shmuel, Im Ola Niftes Lokoshkin Chatas. According to Shmuel, we'd say if an Ola can be Niftes, like we just saw above, so would we then also, wouldn't we for sure say that by a Chatas? Of course we should. So says the Gemara, Al Daiti, the Rabbi Yochanan, within the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, Amr Zeira Yiru, they should, within the sheet of Rabbi Yochanan, who's more strict on this, as we saw just 2 lines ago, where he says that they're Kipsuli Amukdashin Yiru, they should go out and they should graze until they form a blemish and then they can be sold. Amr Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yitzchak Mekaitzin Bohen Esamizbeach. What would we do with these animals? They can be used to be put on the mizbeach when they're just extra animals. All the extras can be used Mekaitzin Esamizbeach. Says Gemara, how can you do that? Bekasha Yesh Chatat Shekrevu Olam. If you have a korban chatas, just for kicks, you can go put it up as an olah. You're not allowed to do that. That's a different level of kedusha. How can you just take a chatas and make it an olah? So the Gemara says this is a big yesod in korbanos. Amar Rabbi Yosa Shanyahi. This is different. She'ain korbanos tzibur nikbain ala b'shchita. There's a difference between a korban tzibur and a korban yachid. By a korban tzibur, ein korbanos tzibur nikbain ala b'shchita. The only time that animal is actually nikba in halacha, that it has a status of a chatas, is when it's brought by a private person. But when it's being brought by a tzibur for the tzibur, the animal is not nikba. It doesn't have a status until it's brought. Yeah, it was put in the corral for animals that were supposed to be for a chatas for the tzibur. But until it's brought as a chatas for the tzibur, it's not a chatas for the tzibur. It's just an animal. Then we can trade it over to be an olah. However, had it been that of a private person, you're absolutely correct. It was earmarked to be the private chatas of one person. You cannot bring it as an olah. Last line for today to bring us to the bottom of Yud Aleph and Beis. Amar Rabbi Chia. Tonight, Bezdin hu al hamosar sheyikruvu olos. No, even if you don't say that there's a special din by korbanos at tzibur that they're not nikba until the time that they actually bring their korban and therefore you bring an olah, okay. But here it doesn't make a difference because there's a tonight Bezdin that any extra animals would then go as mosar. They would be extra sheyikruvu olos, that they can be brought as an olah even if they were initially brought as a chatas. And that brings us to a close for the evening. It's Thursday. So Shabbos, yes, thank you. So Shabbos, we're going to learn Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, and in Yud Hashem the same. I'm going to see how far I can get. These are very big blot as we move along, but I think that's a wrap. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
You have an hour Shabbos and an hour Sunday.